welcome, guys. Thanks for being up here. Thanks for doing what you're doing, which we'll get into in a few minutes. But I want to really just kind of start with Bruce has been around the industry for a long, long time. Not that you're that old, Bruce, but we've been around a bit. We want to get kind of some of the history of that out of the way, so we can kind of get into the meat of really the company and what it's doing now, which is extremely interesting. So, Bruce, give us, at a very early age, you said, "Hey, I want to have a record. I want to have I want to create a record label." I read this about you. I think it was last night. I was reading some stuff about you, and it's like early on, you're like, "I just want to have a record label." You had a record shop, and you did all these things.
I don't remember saying that, but we'll riff on that a little bit. I'm the founder of Sub Pop Records. This is Adam Farish, the founder of 8-Stem, which is just a radical new take on how artists can create and distribute music. But I'll riff a little bit on my own background. In the late 70s, I got really interested in kind of the punk new wave underground, and I noticed that what was really fascinating was that there were artists who were actually putting out their own records, which was actually pretty unusual. And I moved from Chicago to Olympia to go to the Evergreen State College, and the radio station there, Chaos Radio, was the only station in America that prioritized independent records. So it was just coincidentally, I kind of fell into that. I had access to their library, and I noticed that a lot of bands from smaller cities, let's say Milwaukee or Portland or Seattle, if those bands put out records, they were completely ignored by the mainstream media. So what I did is I put together a small press magazine that reviewed music released by artists from small towns, and nobody was really doing that at the time. So from 1980 on, I've been kind of an activist promoting the idea of local music and independent music. The zine morphed into cassette compilations and then started putting out records. And with my business partner at the time, John Poneman, we opened up an office in 1988 at First in Virginia and started putting out records. And it's going to make a very funny movie when that movie finally gets made, let me tell you.
That was Sub Pop Records, in case you didn't know that one. So, obviously, early on, I would say most people would probably say you were probably the father of that genre. It was definitely the Seattle scene, right? Tell us just in a quick, 2 or 3 minutes, what it was like to be in the middle of that once it got going, say 92 or 3 when it was...
I'd go back a little bit more, but yeah, sure, we can do that. Around 86, 87, kind of noticed that a lot of the bands in town were kind of coming up with their own sound, which is a sludgier, heavier version of punk. And these bands were listening to hard rock as well as alternative rock and punk, and it was just kind of a unique synthesis. And because Seattle was kind of, it was way up in the corner of the country, and a lot of bands weren't really visiting, and a lot of bands weren't really leaving, it just kind of created its own little scene. Of course, this is all pre-internet. And I would say 89, 88, it really started to come together. That's when Mudhoney put out their first single. That's when Nirvana essentially came into existence. So the summer of 88, right around the corner at the Central Tavern, there was an epic show, July 7th, 1988, just to give you a feel for this. Soundgarden, very few people had heard of at the time. Mudhoney, and then this band from Denver, The Fluid, played. Okay? And I knew that stuff was the scene was really going to blow up, and I'll share this one anecdote with you, and this will just kind of like nail it. Okay? We're at the office, and we get a phone call from a guy in Brooklyn who says, "What's up? Your records are cool." I said, "Yeah, you should come on out here. We got this great show." He goes, "Okay." So he gets on a Greyhound bus and travels 3,000 miles for this show. Okay, that's when I knew the Seattle scene was going to go global. Now, unfortunately, it was really hard for me to get this guy out of my apartment. He just stayed there for like two weeks. Ed McGinley. So that was the moment that I knew shit was getting real.
That's very cool.
And the show was amazing. Totally blew everybody away.
And so, kind of the rest is kind of history. Nirvana, the whole kind of thing happened, and you're obviously in the middle of that, which is absolutely awesome. So tell us, what started you thinking about other things? What year were you like, you know what, I kind of had enough of this stuff. Let's move on to something more interesting or just different.
Well, the scene here in Seattle was really vibrant, really active, early, mid-'80s. Interestingly, after Nevermind came out, the culture just really changed, right? Bands started talking about deals instead of about art and politics, So it got kind of boring for me. Around 97, I actually left the label and I moved to remote island, Orcas Island, and decided to raise some kids. And it was very intense business, let me tell you. It was pretty crazy. So I deserved a 20-year vacation, and I took it. That's basically what I did. So I moved to remote island, and on that remote island, I bumped into, coincidentally, this incredibly smart guy here, Adam Farish, and we started talking about music probably around 2004, 2005. Around 2007, I was thinking, there's this platform out there called MySpace that looks really interesting. However, it doesn't let bands sell their music. And I thought that was really ridiculous. So I tried to get a little business going that was a little bit like Bandcamp that's happening now. It didn't really get off the ground, but it gave Adam and I an opportunity to kind of talk about what the future of music looked like with digital distribution. Again, I've always been interested in independence, acts who are putting out their own material. Even though I created a label and that kind of got fairly large, my heart was always aligned with independent music. What can independent creative artists do to distribute their music and get attention? So that was kind of the seed of the conversation, and Adam started to take some of our ideas so seriously. He hired a dev team over in India to work on a prototype, which he eventually showed me that blew my mind, and that's kind of why we're sitting here together.
Yeah. So hand that to Adam. I wanted to get the Bruce stuff out of the way so I could talk about Adam. So Adam, you have a very interesting background. I mean, it's not like a clear path, right? I mean, owner of an inn, basically ran that for the last 10-ish years, right? So what got this kernel started? I mean, obviously, you meet a guy like this, you're kind of like, well, he's got some interesting ideas, but...
Yeah, well, I think my entry point into it, and also moving to Orcas Island, where we actually met, I was taking what I thought at the time was a well-deserved vacation from the music industry, also on the performance side. And so I was in the rave scene, if any of you have ever heard of those. They call them music festivals now because there aren't any police arresting people usually, but back in the day they were called raves, and that's where people got arrested. So I was in that scene and touring around the world, playing shows at these events, and as I started to move further towards a career, quote unquote career in the music industry, I began to get less and less, I guess, less pleased with the culture as it moved up in business. It kind of got less and less creative. And so I looked at technology. I was the founding member of a technology company in 1998. At that time, I was a first-year computer science student in the Bay Area, and there were not enough butts to fill seats at that time. So if you had 4 months of computer science under your belt, you were an engineer, and you were hired. So that's what I did. So doing that while playing music was really exhausting, and the company tanked, and I just wanted to do something radically different. And so I moved to Orcas Island, where I met Bruce doing something totally different. So So that's where I landed there. But always focused on music. Always from a very early age. I usually say I was hopelessly obsessed with sound from a very early age.
Yeah. And so when you guys met up, obviously you didn't think, hey, we're going to start a company together. I'm sure that didn't happen that way. So it never does. At least I've never heard of it doing it that way. So what was the apple from the tree kind of aha moment that said, we should do something here? I mean, where was that? I'm sure that came from probably your side of the fence, but
I was waiting for Bruce to say that, and it took about 10 years. Whoa, it took about 10 years to actually get that. So I would bring Bruce. I had a studio, still working on music all the time, and I'd be like, hey, Bruce, come and listen to this. And he'd kind of go like, this cool, moving on. Then I'd play him something else, and he'd be like, I don't really feel that one too much. And I'd be like, oh, that's good, man. And so we did this like back and forth thing, talking about music, and I'm bringing him all this, having him come in and listen all the time. And I was like, gosh, I'm kind of like waiting for Bruce to say like, that's where it's at. And so when we talked about starting a label together and poked around, and it didn't really get off the ground, like Bruce said. And then I was traveling, touring with a band, and we were driving over the mountain pass towards eastern Washington or Idaho, going to a gig, and I started talking with another engineer in the front seat, and I said, I got this idea for like, this is going to happen in the future. And my engineering friend gave me the thumbs up. Yeah, that's sound. So I started rapping with Bruce about it, and Bruce did the same, like, I don't know, man, kind of he did that thing again for a while, and I was kind of like, I want to really see this one through and see if I can get the right answer. This is my shot, You don't even have to hear anything. All you have to do is look at it on a phone screen. It's an easier sell than getting a piece of music that's perfect. And so when I hired a team of developers and spent 6 months building out a prototype, and then when I finally showed it to Bruce, and I got my confirmation, like, yes. Okay, now he says that I'm on to something. So that was the point. Like, okay, let's do this and let's do it together.
And when was that?
That was mid-2014.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, so almost 2 years ago.
May 2014.
Yeah. So fast forward 2 years, what was the one thing that not one thing. I'm sure there's many things. What was the one thing that was the biggest surprise for you working with Bruce?
Well, we've been hanging out together for 10 years. We've spent time at Burning Man together on at least 3 different occasions. So we got to know each other pretty well. So I had come to know Bruce and how he does things. And so I felt like I had a pretty good idea of how he operates, and it's the complementary part, I think, is the most pleasant surprise, because I have a technological sensibility and a technological sensitivity. Like I can just make things work, and sure. I've always been able to do that. But I don't necessarily have a cultural sensitivity. I like to go do cool things, but I don't just automatically gravitate intuitively towards something that is going to be a massive global phenomenon.
Sure. And
Bruce does. Yeah. So, and it was actually one of those times at Burning Man. I was standing with Bruce, and it was 5 o'clock in the morning, and there was a DJ who was going on and getting ready to drop his set. And standing there with Bruce, full moon, and he leans over to me and says, if I had a record label right now, I'd sign that dude. And I went like, Lauren? I've been hanging out with him for like 10 years, man. He's just like, there's this guy, whatever, just this guy doing his thing. People are dancing and whatever. And I was like, I don't know, man. And Bruce leans over and he goes, trust me. Like that. And that person, maybe 3 years later, went on to be one of the biggest phenomenons in electronic music that there is. His name is Bass Nectar. And he has a cult following of a lot of people who get tattoos on their bodies, and he sells more tickets than anybody else. And here's this dude who was like my friend, who I'd been hanging out with for 10 years and had no sensitivity about that. So when those things would happen, and I would realize like this is a very complementary relationship, that I can just kind of listen to those things when Bruce goes like, trust me. I know that means business.
Yeah, cool. And what has in that process over the last couple of years, since you've kind of been more official business partners, I get the sense that you're more the driver of the business, because of the technology, et cetera. Has there been any parts where you would like want to redo because it just didn't work right? And I'm more kind of looking for like the relationship, like things that just didn't work right in the relationship that you figured out, like, oh, okay, we can do it better this way, or oh, that didn't work, let's do it this way. Is there something that the relationship between you two you figured out and how to make it work better?
Lots of the make it work and figure out how to do better. I mean, I think with sort of the founder relationships in a company. It is like it's a long-term relationship.
You're getting married.
You're getting married.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's kind of like a marriage. So if you can date for 10 years before you get married, that's a big plus.
Sure.
So we effectively dated for 10 years before we got hitched.
Yeah.
So the idiosyncrasies were out in the open,
Yeah. Because I mean, one of the things that we always talk about in the startup world is just the fact that finding a co-founder is not easy, because having that relationship is just it's special, and it's just like it is like getting married because it's not easy to break up.
Right.
It's not like you can just walk away.
And I think very early on there was actually we can go into this is kind of fun because we have an audience where we can kind of go into the esoteric realms of this. But there was a time Bruce and I were at a music festival, and this was early on. We were first getting to know each other, and Bruce was throwing this festival, and I had agreed to just do sound and infrastructure, tech stuff for this music festival, and it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. Things are going awesome. Everybody's raging it, and Bruce and I like teamed up for a moment. We were like, this is pretty awesome. Yeah, check this out. And Bruce said, I was talking with one of my advisors, and asking him about the people who I'm working with. And this is when Bruce was kind of still. I mean, he still is the Nirvana guy, but he was really the Nirvana guy because this was like early 2000s, and it was close to all of that chaos that was going on. And, we were walking. He's like, I asked him about this person. And he says to me, and I asked him about you. And I was kind of like, oh, well, I wonder what he said. And Bruce leans over to me and he said, you're my right-hand man. And I was like maybe 25 at the time, 26 or something like that. And I normally would have responded like, no. You're my right-hand man. Yeah. And I'm the guy.
Yeah.
But it was kind of the first time anybody had ever said anything like that, where I went like, I'm proud to be your right-hand man. Like, yeah.
I'm okay with that.
I like that.
Yeah.
So that was kind of established as more of just a general level of respect
Sure.
of one another and admiration, too, that I just don't sweat it. Neither one of us needs to be the boss. It's just about, like, doing things that you're good at and trying to compliment one another.
Yeah, get it done. Yeah. So, Bruce, what is it in the business, in the sense of running a business, in this company? What does it get you up in the morning? What's like the kernel that really excites Bruce about what you're doing?
Well, first of all, startups involve a lot of creativity because you have a general idea what you're doing, but every day there's a new adventure.
Sure.
And with Sub Pop, I realized that I love the early part of the business where I'm kind of a generalist in a way.
Sure.
Do a little bit of everything. And then as the company grew, it became more and more specialized. We hired more specialists. It got a little more corporate. And this is a classic growth pattern in businesses. So to be involved with a creative business from the ground up is just really exciting because it's always an adventure. There's more drama. You're not quite sure where it's going to go. So just from a business point of view, also the sense of camaraderie that comes with working with a small group of people where you're really counting on each other and you're watching each other's back. I'm not a corporate type per se, and that environment doesn't really work for me.
For some reason, that doesn't surprise me.
That just doesn't work for me, but working with a small group of people who are really excited about changing the world, it's pretty awesome. And for me specifically about this project, which is we haven't really talked about, and it's a little complicated, but from the music side, as a music omnivore, as somebody who appreciates all different genres of music, we're creating a platform, I think, that is going to allow for a lot of collaboration and a lot of cross-pollination between different scenes, like electronic music producers, hip-hop, indie rock, and so forth. And to me, that kind of brings out the mad scientist in me. And I just think about all the creative musical possibilities that come from that kind of intertribal diplomacy.
Yeah. So, Adam, why don't you explain what you do? Explain the business of what you're doing right now.
Yeah. So traditionally, I'll explain it kind of to the audience. I'm sure everybody in this audience has probably gotten a hold of a piece of music either by purchasing it or downloading it or something where you get a piece of music and you press play and you wait for the song to finish, and that's your listener experience. As a music producer, I look at music very differently. I don't look at it as a hard good. I look at pieces of music as dynamic pieces of technology that are open to my interpretation because I can take them apart and then re-engineer them to do the things that I want them to do.
Yep.
So that's what music producers do. And so when Bruce and I started talking about this, we were going like, okay, so this is the listener experience has been the same for the whole time. You press play, and then you wait for the song to finish, and that what you do with that piece of music is determined by somebody else who's in another city, and you actually buy a license to play music. You don't actually own it, And it's a very source-centric model where somebody else is in charge of what you do with it.
Yep.
Whereas with a piece of technology, for instance, if you get a program and you do all kinds of things with it that maybe the vendor didn't actually intend for you to do with it at all. It's open architecture. And so I was looking at that going, let's look at this delta that exists between the listener and the music producer and see if we can move those two relationships closer together so that listeners and specifically listeners on mobile devices can harness these supercomputers in our pocket to do things that are similar to what a music producer does. So for instance, if I'm listening to a piece of music in the studio and there's this incredibly annoying saxophone solo, I can make adjustments so that I don't have to listen to that saxophone solo ever again. But the piece of music is still the way it was. Or if I want to move a verse instead of being before the chorus, I could move the verse in front of the intro. I can do that too. And if I want to take out the vocal in that music and put my vocal in there, I can do that too. So that's the functionality that we've gone after with literally redesigning a new format for music that is interactive. So the first 130 years of the music industry was a passive listener experience, and what we're entering into now is a dynamic, user-centric, interactive musical experience.
So you're able to listen and edit kind of on the fly, right? And where's the credit for that go? Like, let's say I had a piece of music and I created it, and then you're listening to it and you changed it. What happens there? So
everybody who works for us in our company, or the first thing, our first and foremost directive is that we are an artist-centric company. So that is a sort of differentiator between other music businesses who are not artist-centric. To be quite frankly, it's like 0.007 of a cent per play is not artist-centric.
Sure.
So with that in mind, everything that goes on in our ecosystem goes into the IP of the original piece of music and is owned by the original owner of that
So
music.
I own that piece that you're listening to.
If you're an artist.
Sure. And Bruce edits it or changes it.
You're welcome.
Is that what happens?
Bruce does something to it. You get everything that Bruce did, and anything that happens downstream from that piece. Yeah. No, so it's always you as the artist. So it's always your song name.
Okay.
But it's Bruce's beatbox remix.
Oh, cool. So I'm still underneath there somewhere as the founder, I guess.
Well, you're not underneath there. You're on top, and Bruce is on the bottom of that. Is a little meta tag down there.
Okay.
And then if I heard Bruce's remix, well, that's sweet. So I'm going to get his remix, and then I'm going to do Adam's remix.
Yeah.
But it's also yours, the artist.
Sure.
So everything that happens downstream from what I do. So it's kind of like it's a multiple flywheel engagement where the artist provides the content, Bruce does the first remix, I do the second remix, and then it funnels back to the artist, and then the whole thing starts again.
Got it. Okay. Now I get it.
Yeah.
So does everyone on your team have to play music?
There are people who don't. No. But you have to. That's part of the deal.
You have to appreciate
we have.
music.
Well, you have to, and
You would,
really,
yeah.
most people do, and probably they wouldn't be attracted for working for peanuts at a crazed startup with a bunch of people who are obsessed with music. If you weren't obsessed with music too.
Yes, exactly. Probably wouldn't fit in very well.
No.
And tell us, how big is your team? How many? What do you,
In Seattle, we have 7. Yeah, in Seattle. And then we have other specialized developers who are working on specific chunks, who are scattered throughout the world. Our core audio engineers in London. I have another GUI person in Germany. And so what we're doing, it's a huge, like, monumental task, what we're actually trying to do. Sometimes I tell people, I'm like, this is not a coupon app. And then sometimes I so wish, I'm like, God, I should just design a coupon app.
It'd be so cool.
So cool. And just pull a bunch of things that somebody else created and put them into a product and push it out.
Yeah.
But we have to do everything from scratch, like literally from scratch. There are no libraries to do what it is that we're trying to do because nobody would want to do this because it's kind of preposterous in the first place to even attempt.
Yeah.
So, but what that also does is it attracts very talented people to a moonshoot. It's exciting.
Yeah, really smart people want to work on really hard things. Yeah.
Thankfully.
Yes. Yeah. So you now have a company that's creating some cool widgets. What's the challenge now? What's the challenge? Is it people, finding people? Is it money? Is it educating the marketplace? Where's the biggest thing that keeps you up at night?
The people part is challenging. There's a global developer shortage right now, and also being in a sort of in a very niche market with a lot of technical challenges that need to be solved. It's difficult to find people who can actually do the pieces that we need to do because there just aren't very many of them in the first place, and most of them have been gainfully employed at some place where we can't just pull them out of.
Yeah, and you don't have like big dollars you can just write in a big check.
No. So we have to do it. We have to use magic.
Yes.
To get them to come and work for us. Yeah.
And what do you think? Like, if I'm a prospective employee, what is going to get me to work with you guys? Is it working with Bruce? Is it working on the problem? Is it a combination thereof? What is the thing that you would say is the magnet?
I think that the magnet is that when you really grasp what it is that we're working on, this is the single largest play in musical history. So if you want to make history, and we're going to find out pretty soon whether it works or not and actually does its thing, but the upside is that you're in when stuff takes off. And if you were at Sub Pop in 1990 and you were stuffing records into envelopes and sending them out the door at that time, pretty soon you were crowd surfing 100,000 people at a music festival because you were allowed to go backstage so that you could stage dive when Mudhoney hit it. And that moment of surfing, that kind of energy, is a once-in-a-lifetime deal. And you usually don't get it if you're working at Amazon.
Sure. No offense to Amazon.
No offense to Amazon at all.
Yeah. What's the thing that, for you, Bruce, what's the thing that is the most exciting piece for you? I mean, you've done some really wild stuff. Let's just say that in your early years.
Understatement.
Yeah. So what is it that keeps you engaged? What's the thing that?
Well,
because I can see it with Adam. Adam's trying to change the world. I mean, I get that loud and clear. What is it for Bruce?
Well, I get to work with this guy.
Okay.
That's
He's
He's a pretty interesting guy. And the people who are hanging out at our office and helping us out are very interesting people. And I know that I think my role is going to come more into focus once this technology is really dialed, and it's getting really close. Right now, I've been bringing in artists without truly a functional technology, so they're just having to trust me. But I know that very soon I'm going to be able to pick up the phone and talk to just about any creative musician and producer in the world and give them a ride on the spaceship. And that's going to be awesome.
So that's obviously what keeps you engaged. Yeah.
Working with creative people. And it's just going to get better and better. And it has been getting better and better.
Yeah. Was it just... I'm assuming it was just you two when you started, right? Yeah. Who's your first hire?
Our first hire was actually in creative spaces, and this probably happens in business spaces too, but I'd noticed it especially because I'm in a creative space. You don't know where these people are going to emerge from.
Sure.
So Bruce is walking down the street one day, and he runs into a person whose name is Phil Wetherill, who's out here someplace in the audience. He's back there, who was also an intern at Sub Pop, the first intern at Sub Pop. And Bruce runs into this guy on the street, and they start rapping. Hey, what's going on? Bruce goes, oh, man, I'm talking about my friend Adam. We're doing this thing, and Phil goes like, let me check it out. So Bruce comes over to Phil comes over to Bruce's house, and Phil sits down on the couch, and he's just kind of very dry in his sense of humor. And he looks at me and he goes, "So blow my mind." And I'm like, okay, I like this guy already. This is good. So I showed it to Phil, and Phil was like, I can see this. And he was also, he wrote his college thesis on independent music and decentralizing the music industry, which is exactly
what you're doing.
My rap.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time hanging out, and so Phil just started working for us, and I didn't even know that he was working for us, but I'd sit down. We were staying at his house to save some scratch, and I'd sit down in the morning, and Phil would be like, "Here, you need to read this, and here's what I did last night, and blah blah blah. We're going to go meet with this guy," and I'd be like, "Oh, cool." And then after a while, that kept happening, and I went like, "Oh, well, Phil is working for us." That's how it works, which is exactly the same thing that he did at Sub Pop. He went there to buy records directly from the source at Sub Pop, and they were trying to solve some problem with shipping records in envelopes. And Phil was like, "Dude, I'll call you later." So he called them with this whole list of envelope companies and prices and everything. And then he went back there, and they had all their envelopes, but nobody to put the records in the envelopes. And so he just started working there too. Yeah, that's great. And so he was the first person who we actually brought on board. And brought on board it just happened naturally, and so that was our cool. Hire number one was just kind of natural, and then shortly after that, our second second hire, who was a real hire, was our CTO, which we needed, and managed to get him to understand the idea of what we were working on. He was a senior software engineer at Zulily. And he saw what we needed to do and then understood it and began to take it to a much higher level of functionality and intricacy than I was able to do. Yeah. So he was our big push who actually began to solidify the technological
put the pieces
side
together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in this journey so far, you're 22 months into it. What's the next 8 months going to look like? And Bruce, let me hear it from your point of view, and then we'll hear from Adam's point of view.
Adam probably has no idea what I'm about to say. What I think is going to happen is that we are going to release our beta very soon, maybe even this week, and I think we're going to stay in beta till the end of the year. That's my thinking, until we get our Android platform up and going. And I think next year we're going to officially launch across both platforms with a lot of cool music. And I think this is the first time Adam's heard me think about this.
I think that we're going to launch officially tomorrow morning at 8 a.m.
That's a pretty wide discrepancy.
I've been saying that every day for 4 months.
You're close.
Yeah.
You're imminent. It's imminent. It's going
December
to happen.
December 1st. And then I was like, December 1st, 2016, maybe.
Yeah,
so
we've all been enough.
But it's funny, it's like you look at these things, and it's actually kind of I've stopped saying if we just need to do this. This is easy, because then you're not only arrogant, you're also an idiot, because technology is so complex. And it's kind of like in everything that I've done previous to this, I haven't actually been on the development side of shipping an actual product. And it's kind of like I've built houses I've built 2 houses that I have lived in. And so as you go forward in the house building process, as you get further and further along, everything is streamlined and it moves faster as you get closer to the finish line. And technology is exactly the opposite. The more you do, the more complex it gets. Which is why there's 20 some odd thousand people working at Microsoft, because it's really complicated. And so every day almost, there's like these, your forward steps get smaller and smaller, and you actually need them to get bigger and bigger. So the push out the door, we could be in beta as we build out our Android platform for a long time. But it's going to be a totally rockin' beta. Like, it's going to be so fun. It's going to be really, really fun. So anybody who gets in on that is going to get to see, a piece of you get a view of the inside of the spaceship and see how that works. And as that process moves on, as you kind of, in the music industry, bands are very finely crafted brands. So it's just like, it's just like any finely crafted brand. You don't go to Coca-Cola and say, hey, I designed a new can, and I think you should put your Coca-Cola in there from now on. And that's, you don't do that. So you build relationships for where you're at, and then sort of every stage you move a little further, you kind of go a little bit further out into the artistic ecosystem until you get to the top, and then at that point you're established and you've proven yourself. And so it's a humbling process, but it's also very, very encouraging to be continually bringing on people who are just incredibly creative and incredibly talented, and also have a great deal of influence over culture. So we're bringing everybody under kind of like one roof.
One extra person when you only have 7 is 1 of 8. Starts to affect a lot. Right? And all startups are very wired that way. What is the thing about your culture? And you may not even know you're doing this, or you may know you're doing this. I don't know which. I'm going to ask either way. What is it, the thing about your culture that you most admire? Both sides. You may not. It exists. I know it exists.
I'm totally aware of it. The culture is, I would say, the crew that we have is very open-minded and friendly and respectful. It's just a very awesome working environment where there is no. It's very, extremely productive, playful, and uncorporate. And that's what I like about it.
Yeah, I think it's necessary when you're working with creative people to maintain a very high level of integrity, and that being artist-centric and actually needing to, we're delivering. Our customers are artists. Those are the people who fill our content funnel. That's one customer segment, and the other half are listeners, and we have to maintain those relationships at a really, really high level of integrity. And as soon artists are by nature and training very sensitive to any sort of anything odd that's going on. So if you're saying something that's really happy but you're frowning, then artists smell that. Maybe they can see it and they sense it. They might not know exactly what it is, but it's something that makes them uncomfortable. Or if you're smiling and you're saying something that's really bad news, they're going to pick up on that too. Sure. And those people are not going to put music onto your platform. So that part of the culture, it's almost like a self-regulating system. And we've designed it that way so that everybody who's involved has to be on the level. And that's the only way that it's going to work.
Is that something you actually talk about?
Bruce and I talk about it, and then
amongst yourselves, or
amongst ourselves mostly. And I think that the people on the team just kind of operate that way naturally, and it's our job as the kind of like the guardians,
The keeper of the culture.
yeah, to be keeping that culture and to be watching out for those kind of. I mean, I would put those on the threats on a SWOT analysis for sure. That's a threat to incoming content in artistic relationships. You have to keep all of the relationships on the level.
Yeah. Well put. So, question I ask every guest that's ever been on the stage is, how did you make your first dollar that wasn't from a relative? So, like, you can't be, picking up apples for your grandma. That doesn't count. So how did you make the first dollar? When was it, and how did you do it?
Well, I was reading this comic book, and they had an ad for Christmas cards. And if you sold Christmas cards, you could get some money. So my entrepreneurial spirit was so strong that I went door to door in July selling Christmas cards. And I think a lot of people just felt sorry for me and bought them.
Exactly.
And I made $40, and I bought my first record player.
How old were you?
I was 9 years old.
Wow.
And I bought my first record, which was Revolution by the Beatles. And I rocked. But I do have a second anecdote that does involve a relative, and I just have to share it. And that is, I threw a carnival in my backyard, and my highest grossing event was I tied my brother to a chair and paid people a nickel to throw wet sponge at his face.
Wet sponges?
Wet sponges, yeah.
Nice.
I made, I don't know, $3 or $4.
Nice. Okay.
So
I just got to interrupt. I've never heard anyone throwing wet sponges. Why wet sponges?
Because they're safe.
Okay. Okay. Go ahead, Adam. My fault. So how'd you make your first dollar not from a relative?
I want to know which brother it was. Which brother? Of course, yeah. He's such a good sport, that guy. He's your little brother. First dollar. Well, it was kind of, I had to take there were a couple of pivots in order to make my first dollar. I remember it well. I was in second grade, and I went looking for a job. And I asked around. I was 8 years old, and nobody wanted to hire me. But I needed to get some scratch so that I could. At the time, it could have been actually to buy cassette tapes. I don't know for sure, but the whole scramble together your money to buy music. So in order to, there was a girl in my class in second grade, and her parents owned a convenience store. So I thought, if she was my girlfriend, I could ask her parents for a job. And they would have
You
to
went
give
to
me,
that level, huh?
I was like, this was serious. And she wasn't even really my type. Like, we didn't agree philosophically on things. And also, I was
second
kind of
grade,
like,
you didn't agree philosophically.
no. I was a little bit concerned because her family owned a convenience store, and I was, child of hippie parents, and we ate kale and rice and stuff. And this was like all this plasticized food. I was already having issues with that. So I asked her to be my girlfriend, and she said yes. And the next day I called her dad, who owned the convenience store, and I said, "Hello, this is your daughter's boyfriend."
Yes.
And
Nice. Which I'm sure he was surprised to hear.
he was kind of surprised on the phone, but I was owning it. And I'm looking for a job, and I would like to come work in your store. So he said, "Okay, why don't you come by tomorrow?" And I said, "Okay, I'll do that. How much are you going to pay me?" And he said, $1 per hour. And I said, my rate is $3.75. And so he said, okay, come on over. So I came over to the grocery store, and he taught me how to work the little, back in the day before, barcodes. It was like the little thing, you dial the price on it, and you do the tick, 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 and you put price tags on everything. And I totally priced out the cookies, and then I moved on and priced out the sodas and all this stuff. And I made I think I made over $3.75. And that was, I just was like, this is all I need. Exactly. Like, this is it. That's it. And I was really good at pinball at that age. So for 25 cents, I could play pinball for like an hour. And they also, in the convenience store, they had arcade games. So this worked out perfectly. So at that, and I don't think that I performed exactly to his standard.
Probably not.
And also, things were a little bit on the rocks with me and his daughter. It wasn't really going that great. So that was it. But that was my first. Yeah,
that's good.
Like close to $4, I think.
Yeah, close to $4. and so, go back to the company. What is the thing that worries you in your kind of growth? I mean, you've gone 2 years. Have you guys raised money? Okay, so you've raised money. What's the scary thing for you guys?
Raising more money.
Yeah, that's always a concern. There is it's funny in the music space because the global appetite for music has just gone bananas, and the global revenues for music have just gone bananas, like the other way, bananas. So it's a difficult time to be pitching music platforms
because you don't have a clear revenue model. I'm just going to guess that.
It's not established at this time.
Okay.
But there are things that we can see that we don't want other people to know about yet.
Sure.
So that part about it, like we're going out, we're going to need to raise some more capital, like starting now, and so that there are tremendous opportunities that are in front of us right now, and there are development hurdles that we need to bring people on in order to seize those opportunities and do the things that we want to do. And we need to pay those people who are going to come on and make that happen. It's that stage, you know. And so that part that's a little bit agonizing, but also as we've hit milestones, we have been very conservative in our raise and our spend. So we have kept all of our milestones have come in at rates that are that prove that we're doing this very, very, there's no extra, like, buy your own pencils. It's not going to kill you, but it'll help us out.
Yeah.
So all of the expenses have really been in order. And so now when we're actually saying, like, here's what we've done in this period of time, and here's how much we've done it for. Now think of what we can actually do with 10x that in a quarter of the time.
Sure. And the process of raising money, which is never easy, no matter I don't care how good your product is, it's never easy. I don't care how good you are, it's never easy. So in this process of raising money, is there something that you think you guys have that is extra special that others wouldn't have?
We have a really amazing team of people who have come to the table this was a whole year of Bruce and I just building whatever we could for cash out of pocket and flying around the United States and trying to convince our friends, even people that we know, that what we're talking about is even possible. And it's a long relationship building process, even with people who you know, and even with your family members, to show them over time, because we can see it, but they can't see it. They don't know what we're talking about. So you actually have to, hit incremental, visible, and measurable milestones in order to even get your friends and family to buy off on the concept.
Who's been the biggest surprise that you had to convince?
Oh man.
Like, who is the guy, like you guys are like, oh no, he'll totally get it. You tell them, they're like, what?
Well, I think that happened first when we were going to talk to. There are 3 major record labels left in the United States, and so we actually started there with the people who were least likely to believe us. Sure. And because we came from the old world where you could just do that, and they had piles of cash at the time. So we started by thinking, like, I remember Bruce and I went to New York, and there was a friend of ours who was negotiating these arrangements and getting us meetings with high-level people at record labels. And I'm sitting there, having coffee with Bruce at, like 8 o'clock in the morning. We're waiting for our Uber, and Bruce is like, dude, this could be in the bag, like, today. Like, we could totally just raise everything we need, just like just today. This could totally be in the bag.
Yeah.
And then, sit down with the people at the record label and tell us what we're thinking about, and they're like, get out.
This is retarded.
Like,
Get.
what? Like, what? oh, this guy, he just doesn't know what he's talking about. Let's go to the other guys, So we go to the other guys, and they go like, I don't know what you guys are talking. Like, you're nice enough, and all that stuff, but like, we're not in a position to help you with this. Sorry, So we go like, go have some drinks, and we go, well, maybe tomorrow could be the day. We're in New York, we got to do this and make the rounds, and then the next people are just like, thanks for coming. Really good to meet you. Oh, Bruce, could you sign this book? And so he just signed an autograph.
Yeah, because I'm not signing any checks. So
yeah.
You
True
sign
story. True story. And so that was really alarming. So and it was funny, and then we did these kind of like these trips where we're talking to people where we thought, oh, they're music people. They're just gonna see that this is very obvious. That this is where this is going. But they're not just music people, they're actually risk-averse Stanford grads who are sitting at the top of hedge funds and M&A firms that are disguised as record labels, and they don't want to mess around with your cockamamie plan.
Sure.
So we refined the process for an entire year, iterating different business plans, concepts, and getting better at actually talking about it. We were saying the exact same thing when we went back a year later, but we just said it in a different language.
Yeah, you reframed it.
Yeah. And there was a time, it was about a year ago, when we were meeting with a major record label that Bruce had a long history with. And there was a person at that record label who a year earlier had screamed on the phone, like literally screamed. It was a memorable moment for me on this meeting on the phone with these guys who we thought were going to write us a check. It did not happen. And he screams on the phone, "We are not doing A&R for apps." And he's like pounding his fists on the table. I can hear on the conference phone. A&R is artist and repertoire. It's kind of like grooming artists to become bigger artists. And he said, "We are not doing A&R for apps." And I said, well, that's it. Like, I'm never talking. I don't need to talk to this guy ever again. That's very clear. So a year later, the same guy who set up that meeting a year ago, so he said, I want you guys to come back to New York, and we got this going on. We set these other meetings, and I'm going like, dude, I'm not even going to take the time to do this. This is nonsense. This guy said very clearly he is not going to change his mind. There is no way. And Bruce, in his complimentary relationship, insisted that we go talk to this guy. And I said, okay, the only reason that I'm going to talk to this guy again is because I want to get a clearer picture of who is going to play this guy's character in our movie when the movie's made, because I need to pick a really good actor to pound his fists on the table and scream this thing, because we're going to kick his ass in the long run. So we go back to this label, and we reframed it, and we're meeting with these executives up at the top, and like go through the whole spiel, and didn't really put any energy into it. And the guy goes, okay, let's introduce you to the rest of the label heads. Let's do this. And it was this that was the biggest surprise ever, because I have one advisor who has done this a lot of times, and he said, in the history of the world, the likelihood of that guy changing his mind statistically is less than 0.
Yes.
Do not waste your breath.
Yes.
And lo and behold, it happened, and we got a yes. And then that was an indication of like, we can actually change people's minds by talking about this in a way that is more accessible to them and also speaks to their values.
Yeah, I mean, a lot. Obviously, telling a story that's understandable by the person you're sitting across from is super critical when you're raising money, because it truly is a story. It's not just, hey, this is how we do it, and this is we're really cool. I don't really care. Guys, if you have any questions, start bringing them in your head, and we can start asking these guys questions. So when you in this process of talking to people, some of maybe Bruce's old friends or friends of friends, what was the defining moment that said this thing is actually going to work? Was it that meeting, or was it where was it that said, you look at each other and like, actually I don't think we're full of shit. I think we can actually do this thing. When was that? When did that happen?
I would venture to say that when our CTO came on board to work for minimum wage. So that, am I allowed to say that?
I think so.
Yeah, you did.
That's all we could afford. That's what our lawyers told us. They're like, you can't have people work for free. You
gotta pay
can't
them
do that.
something.
You got to so we offshored our headquarters to Orcas Island so we could skirt that whole $15 an hour thing. So that I think even before that was we were trying to raise some funds, and I mean literally like when you're raising money, this is actually it's a charming story. Bruce on Orcus, where we live, he's authored several books, and at this time he had one of his books in the window of this bookstore on Orcus, and he's walking down the street and he hears this Bruce, and this guy comes up to him, and he's like this guy he's from East Indian, and he comes up to Bruce and is like, "Are you Bruce Pavitt?" Which just happens. I hang out with Bruce. This happens like every day, and Bruce is like, "Yeah," and the guy's like, "I am such a big fan. I listened to grunge when I was a kid in India. It changed my life, and I wanted to move to Seattle because of Soundgarden and all this stuff that you did and blah, blah, blah." And Bruce is like, "No way, wow. Here's this thing, and it's Sunday." And he's like, "What are you doing now? You lived here. What are you doing? Can we meet you?" And Bruce is like, "Well, I just wrote a book." And he's like, "It's right there in the window." And the guy goes, "Will you sign it for me, And so they do this thing, and then Bruce comes to my house after that, and he wanders in there, and he's like, "Dude, I just had a total celebrity moment," which is always what he says every day when there's a celebrity moment like this. It's always so surprising to him. It's so funny and endearing. Like he's like, "This guy just recognized me," and so he comes to my house, and he's like, "This guy on the street, man, he just called me out. He's right there. He bought one of my books. I signed it. It was amazing. And he's staying in his house over here and blah, blah, blah." And I said, "What was his name?" And he told me his name. And I said, "Did you tell him that we're trying to raise money?" And Bruce was like, "No." I said, "Did you get his name?" And he goes, "No." And I'm like, "Sounds like perfect. That sounds like a guy we could probably raise some money from. Like this could be like our chance, our first score."
Yeah.
And so I'm like, "Dude, next time that happens, like, get a name. Let's like work all of the connections. Like, we're kind of like, striking out of the record labels right now. They don't want to talk to us. So let's just talk to random people on the street." And
which is what every entrepreneur does.
Yeah, you just do it. I'm like, somebody
just start talking to people.
Like, yeah, they seem really stoked. So this guy, so it was super. I was kind of like a little disappointed. Like, dude, you gotta get the name.
You gotta get the business card.
You gotta get the number so we can call this guy. Anyway, so like days go by. And it turns out Bruce's publicist for his book was, having Google alerts and everything about anything involving Bruce Pavitt. This guy on the street posted on Twitter, like, "Oh my God, I met Bruce Pavitt." And so we got his name off of Twitter, and we talked to him, and he was our first investor in our company.
There you go. Now that is a great, great story to get your first check.
Green light.
Green light. Oh, that is great. That is a good story there. That's how to get it. Just get it done wherever you got to get it done, man. What is the? I mean, it's always been fun. You've had some fun, or else you wouldn't be doing it. But what's been the part that you've most enjoyed, just in the process of the last 18 months, Bruce? Well, I'm just going to pull something out of my hat here. Adam and I were down in Austin last week at South by Southwest. Sure. And through a friend, we were able to connect with an artist that I've admired for many decades, as is Adam. And that's Hank Shockley, who's a genius behind the rap group Public Enemy, who's one of the most creative producers in the history of hip-hop. And we met him and gave him a demonstration, and he was suitably blown away. And just having that experience is what it's all about. Very cool. Yeah. What about you, Adam?
That was that's a big moment where you can actually meet people that you really admire and whose opinion really
you value.
Yeah, is very valuable, and sit down with them and show them what your vision of the future really is what it is.
Yeah.
Here's what it looks like, and you can touch it. And that response and that voice of support and interest is really, I mean, it's so rewarding. There's really nothing like it.
Yeah. How many entrepreneurs in this room have started a company? Yeah, so these people know what it's like for that moment, right? There is nothing else that you can. It's hard to communicate that to somebody that is not an entrepreneur, right? It really is. Questions, guys? Like I said, raise your hand if you have any questions. I'll weave them in. And again, in this process of iterating and when you first started 20 months ago ish, and where it is today, how different is the product than what you thought, right? Than what it is.
There's the sort of like the structure of music has remained unchanged. So that's like the back end, the engineering, the audio engineering part about it, the audio engineering portion has remained the same. The technology behind it has changed. I mean, it changes every day, literally. So it's gone from a localized data structure to a dynamic cloud-based data structure. That's a very big shift when you're pushing around 64 individual pieces of audio from cloud to device, reassembling them and then making them interactive. The UI has changed considerably and continues to do so. And so that whole, what does this product, what does the actual thing that you touch look like and feel like, continues to change. We do user experience testing. We have our offices on Capitol Hill at the corner of East Pike and Broadway.
Sure.
So there's lots of clubs in that area with people waiting in line to get into the shows. So we just go outside and there's people bored waiting in line who obviously love music because they're standing in the rain waiting to hear some. Yeah. And so we talk to those people. It's like, user experience testing. And so every time we go out, we gather data from those people. We learn new things that are points of friction that we are trying to eliminate so that they can have a seamless user experience. So we gather that data and we don't just move on it if one person says it, but if 100 people try and poke something and their expectation is that this thing is going to happen, we need to make that happen. So that's constantly changing.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, go ahead. Can you repeat the question?
I'll repeat the question. The question is, does the product require artists, musicians, to record in any different way? The answer is no. What we're doing is actually taking most of the time pre-existing studio recordings and then dropping them into our technology and then presenting them. So in short, it's called 8-stem. So what an 8-stem file is, stem files is a way that producers exchange music with one another. So that a stem file is a grouping of audio files, production audio files. So you would have, instead of having a lead vocal and a backing vocal and a chorus, harmonies as all different audio elements, you just have one stereo file that's vocals. You have another one that's drums and bass and instruments and so on. And so those are the files. That's what actually is the meat of an 8-stem audio file, or 8 stem files.
Hence the name of the company. Go ahead. Say that again.
I actually do think so, yeah. But that's part of the experiment, just to see how things unfold. But I anticipate that is going to be the case, that artists are going to, when they submit material, for example, they may add more layers of music, so more information for fans to manipulate.
Do you think it'd be less polished, Bruce?
I don't know about that, really. It's hard to say, but it's all a grand experiment.
Yeah. Go ahead. Oh. Question is, have you signed who?
Trent Reznor. No, but that's definitely an artist we would like to be talking to.
Okay. So who was your dominant customer, right, Samantha? Who'd you want to serve the most, the listener or the musician? That's a tough one.
It's a tough question. I think probably the listener. As Adam has pointed out, this is there's been a 130-year history of the music industry, and essentially it's just been play and listen. So we see this as such a dramatic shift that it's literally like the second era of the music industry, and that's a pretty fascinating opportunity.
I would say it was for the artists. So it's different, like we look at it differently. The two are they're obviously connected and they're inseparable, but the artistic, it's actually, it's really both. You can't, but it's kind of like what was the dominant part is that I look at the content funnel and look at and say, like, I have this relationship with music and experience of music when I was a kid. That was my first sort of foray into ecstatic states was from music, and at that time it was just like wild rock music that just made me just crazy. It was just so cool. And as our technology has actually improved, our listening experience has actually declined. So instead of having Bose stereo speakers and Macintosh amps in our house, we have earbuds, and it's a really different sensual experience. Hearing is one of our five senses, and that experience has decreased over time, and so the content feeding that sensual experience has decreased as well. And so I was looking at it as an artistic play, like what can we do to facilitate the creation of a higher of art with more creativity to really enhance the sensual experience of listening to music. So it's kind of like my focus was more on the artistic side. How do we feed that?
It's interesting that you guys are debating this, because that probably is what allows you to be fairly good partners, because in this instance, it's probably really tough to say one is better than the other in this instance, but you need a champion for both parties. And obviously Bruce is a champion on one side, and you're a champion on the other side, which is really pretty interesting. Bruce, go ahead.
Adam is a producer. I was just a manic record collector forever, so we come from different points of view.
Yeah, and that's a very interesting thing that is probably well served for both of you. Any more questions, guys? Oh, go all the way in the back. You're the one, right there. How do you think about remixes for other styles of music?
Well, I think that's one of the things that we're going to help facilitate as we bring in artists from different genres, like I'm saying. Like let's say electronic DJ music, hip hop, indie rock, and so forth. There's going to be some cross fertilization there, and I think it's going to be more beat or dance oriented, generally speaking, and it's going to allow for a lot of creativity and cross-pollination, and I think it's going to get very interesting.
I'll riff on that one just real quick. Even just earlier today, to just give you an example, we're talking with a strategic partner in India, and it's a very large Indian technology company who's looking to deliver our technology to their users, many users. And we're meeting with executives of the company, and they're saying, like, how it works in our company is like it's a hierarchical structure, and we have to run this up to the execs. And we had this whole discussion about millennials and Gen X, and I said all of our executives are over 50 years old, and so they're not into hip hop, so we can't take them this app and show it to them with rap music on it because they're going to hate it. So I said, okay, so what kind of music would you like us to demo for them? And they said, well, have you ever worked with East Indian country music, folk songs?
Wow.
And I said, no, but I'd love to. Because and they said, how about Indian film scores? Because films are huge in India, so the scores of movies are huge. And they said, no, but let us show you what you can actually do. So I'm so excited about this. I can't even contain myself because I'm going to take an Indian folk song and an Indian movie soundtrack, and I'm going to give that to a techno producer and see what he does with it. And then I'm going to take it and give it to a hip-hop producer, and I'm going to see what they do with it. And as you get these people who are really, really good in their craft, they're going to take these songs that people already know, and when they go and show it to the people as they're kind of running it up the ladder, these people who are going to listen to this are going to have an experience of music that they know in an interpretation that they've never even imagined. And that kind of surprise and delight is what just makes it so inspiring.
Yeah. So 2 more questions, guys. Right here. So how do you see you guys fitting more into the lean back listener versus the lean forward listener, which is, you might want to explain the difference between the two because I have no idea.
Well, there's you kind of break music listeners up into several different categories that people fit into. So and you can chime in if you want to if I don't do this justice. And I'll kind of go a little bit more granular than that. There are people who listen to music in a way where it's absolutely a passive listening experience. Like music is kind of like sonic wallpaper. Sure. So people who listen to the radio, for instance, are just filling space.
Those are lean back
filling
listeners.
space, filling space with music. There are other music listeners who maybe get into the metadata behind music and figure out what this musician over here played on this song, and these guys are collaborating with these guys, and they get kind of like a little bit more into the data portion. These are the people who used to read the record jackets. Bruce, you're get a record and you investigate what's going on. And there are a whole bunch of listeners who are now moving into the sort of personalization of music, who are kind of a hybrid of lean forward listener and also music producer, but it's not. I've been doing this for 20 years, and I still have tons of stuff to learn, and that's how everybody who produces music is really. You have to be just crazy for it because there's no end. So how we fit into that is that the lean forward and kind of people who are branching into production, those are the people who make up the sort of secondary flywheel of our content funnel. Original artist supplies music and potential options to people who want to engage, and then those people create something out of it, and then it continues to follow downstream from there. And so what's the ancillary creation of that process and that crowdsourcing is sort of like it's an organically created catalog of derivative works, and that catalog of derivative works can be sorted by region, by genre, by likes, or the cream floats to the top, and then that derivative work, crowdsourced derivative work catalog becomes the next batch of content for the lean back listeners.
Cool. That does make sense. All the way back. Last question.
Absolutely.
Let me make sure quick. Will there be a way for the artist to monetize their works, correct?
Yes, part of being an artist-centric company is driving revenue to artists for their work. So I'll speak kind of broadly about that because we'd like to keep sort of quiet about that. Our internal company dialogue is hip to the idea that music and the sale of music as a commodity has lost a lot of ground and is probably not going to bounce back. And streaming is not sufficient to really feed the artistic class and inspire great music to continue to be made. So we have stopped looking at the sale, like stopped looking at music as the commodity, but instead look at music as the vehicle to a deeper user experience, and that deeper user experience is the commodity. So to create a piece of work that is engaging, create a piece of artwork, create a piece of music that is engaging, and invite people to integrate and engage with that in a way that they've never been able to do that before, that's the rich user experience, and then monetize that experience and drive that revenue to the artist. So kind of like following the gaming world made it there's a lot of data to support if you give away this cool thing and then charge people 50 cents for a coin to go to the next level, you can actually monetize that. So music is instead of being a static widget, a hard good, it's now an interactive piece of technology that you can experience more deeply.
Yeah. The freemium model. Yeah. Well, thank you guys for being here. This has been wonderful. You know, it's funny. I brought a list of questions. I never asked one of them, except the one question of how'd you earn your first dollar, because I ask everyone that question. So I just dropped this early on, like, oh, screw it, I'm just going to go along with this, and it was really quite interesting. So thanks for participating. It's really been wonderful.
Thank you.
So thank you guys for being here, because it would be kind of boring if it was just us. And of course, thanks to our sponsors, Seed IP, PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers, Pivotal, and of course Galvanize, and the Drizzly guy over there. Who wants to have beer, wine, liquor delivered to your doorstep? All of us, right? So that's what Drizzly does. These guys are awesome. Patrick's awesome over there. So they're a big supporter of Startup Grind and the startup community. So thank you, Patrick, for doing it. Oh, one thing. We're here again next month, the last Tuesday of the month. It's Adrian Hanhauer, the owner and president of the Sounders, will be on the stage, and then we actually have an after party after this over the little special thing over there next month. So thank you all for being here. Be safe. See you next month.